Welcome, critters. I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, and we examine and discuss Critical Role episodes, plot lines, and characters through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 5, I believe, Part 2, and joining me today is Petall again. So the icebreaker question that I have for today is, we were actually kind of talking about this before we went on the recording, but what has been your favorite purchase so far this year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can think of two. I've had to be really, because I haven't been working while I've been in school. I've had to be like really careful with the purchases that I've been making. But since I'm getting a job soon and I've been able to make a little bit of money over the past little while, I've recently indulged in getting myself two very exciting things, one of which being a bunch of stickers for my brand new laptop. Which is a lot of fun. And one of them I recently bought on Sunday, I bought the new Pokemon video game, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and I have been so obsessed and hyper fixated on it this entire week. It's basically been all I've been doing. I've already played for like over 30 hours in this game. I am enjoying it so much.
I love that. Yeah, I tend to do that with video games as well. Like Ark, I don't know if you've ever played Ark, but
No, I haven't.
It's kind of like a survival civilization building type of game with like dinosaurs, and you basically like build your own housing structures, and you can either fight or tame dinosaurs.
Oh, nice.
And so like you can ride dinosaurs, like they have saddles that you can make and like everything, and so then you can have your dinosaurs fight the other dinosaurs. And so I actually created you can breed dodo birds.
Oh, nice.
So I created this whole like pen so I could like breed all of my dodo birds. So I had like an army of dodos.
Nice. That sounds incredible. It sounds like that game has all of the same elements that I love about Pokemon Legends Arceus.
Yeah. I can lose days to that game, like days.
It sounds like the sort of game that'd be easy to do with.
Yeah. So I understand that. All right, cool. Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And as always, we love hearing from you guys as well, your insights and stories. So please comment, like, and subscribe below. And let's dive in. So as we open this episode, Vox Machina has just taken a long rest in a sealed off alcove in a tunnel heading deeper underneath the mines of Craghammer in their search for their ally, the paladin Kima. They successfully fought through and escaped a Duergar war camp and are now on their way to a Duergar stronghold castle that houses the Duergar king and his prisons, which they are told contain a captured Kima. They smash open the alcove to continue on their way, and they start smelling brimstone and sulfur as their usual group shenanigans commence, with Vax insulting Grog and Grog tripping Vax, who falls on his face. Keyleth asks Pike more about her vision, where she saw their journey with a variety of landmarks, a jagged obsidian stone fortress, a field of broken glass and bone, a cavern of blue crystal with a fungal forest that surrounds an ancient city, all toward a single twisted horn of soul matter, which is a point of concentrated evil. Clarota, their friendly neighborhood mind flayer, confirms that she describes his hive's city, at the center of which is the temple where Kavarin resides. So they continue on and start seeing pools and streams of lava emerging from the walls before hearing distant footsteps ahead of them. Vex and Vax scout ahead and see two ogres who are dragging a cart behind them. They set a rope trap to successfully trip them, and the entire party rolls initiative to join the fight. Vex and Vax get a surprise round, and Vax lands a killing blow on one of the ogres, while Vex hunter marks the other and shoots the explosive arrow that Percy made her, causing a very loud blast in the tunnel. Tiberius sends off some scorching rays, and all three hit as the remaining ogre approaches the group, and a black ooze creature emerges from the overturned cart that they had been pulling. Vex lightning arrows the black ooze, causing it to split into 2 separate smaller oozes. This is the beginning of the end here.
Yeah.
Vax stabs the remaining ogre, killing it. Percy shoots an ice shot at one of the oozes, which also absorbs the ice damage like it did with Vex's lightning damage. And Keyleth thorn whips one of the oozes. Pike casts insect plague at both of them, which is pretty exciting. Grog attacks one of them with his new flaming warhammer that he took from the Duragar general who Clarota killed. And the oozes both viciously attack Grog, causing a huge amount of damage. I think it was like, what, 70 damage in one go?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then 2 more armored creatures arrive on the scene, drawn by all the noise, and attack Pike and Tiberius. Tiberius casts telekinesis in response to fling one of the armored creatures into a lava pool and shoots ice at the other. Scanlan, who is actually being played by Matt, since Sam wasn't physically there, inspires Pike and casts Dominate Creature on one of the armored creatures. Vex shoots the armored creature that's drowning in the lava pool. Vax jumps over the lava pool to sneak attack the black oozes that are next to Grog. Percy shoots the oozes. Keyleth turns into an eagle, flies over the oozes, reverts back to human form, and then casts Thunder Wave at them. That's a lot of actions in one turn.
Yeah.
Pike uses her sprinter's boots to get over to Grog and casts Cure Wounds on him, but unfortunately, he does start to run over to the dominated armored creature, but gets opportunity attacks from oozes and falls unconscious as a result. The oozes attack Pike and Vax. Clarota casts telekinesis to slam one of the oozes on top of the armored creature that's in the lava and completely dissolves that creature. The dominated armored creature attacks the ooze in the lava, dissolving it as well and breaking the domination effect on itself. Tiberius blasts more ice at the remaining armored creature. Scanlan uses his singing sword to hit the same creature. I think this is the first time we've seen that. Matt uses it, even though Sam never does. Vex attacks one of the oozes by Vax and kills it. Vax daggers a different ooze. Percy shoots and kills an ooze, and Keyleth thorn whips and kills the remaining ooze, ending the battle. I lost track of how many oozes there were at some point.
They
multiplied, and I was like, I don't even know how many there are anymore.
Oozes are awful to fight.
Yeah, and so Pike heals Grog as well as casts a mass cure wounds for the entire party, and Grog notices that the ooze acid attacks had actually dissolved all of his leather armor entirely. Vax takes off his newly found fancy dwarven armor and gives it to Grog out of the kindness of his heart and uses his previous acid-resistant armor. Percy inspects the cart, which contains a leftover glass containment unit within which the oozes were trapped until the cart broke open, presumably for Kavarn's stitched together monstrosity experiments. Then they take a short rest, heal up, and continue on before emerging at the bottom of the large cabin that they had already traversed in front of the Duragar war camp. They take the flying carpet and retrieve Trinket, Vex's bear, who had been left at the top of the cavern. Then they turn down one of the other tunnels that they had seen before, and that's where the episode ends. So, what did we think about this part?
Yeah, it was good. There was, the oozes certainly caused a lot of trouble, but I liked how creative they got with using their environment by using like the lava to like pull them in and burn them up when nothing else was working. That was a really good use of taking advantage of the things around them.
Yeah, those oozes were bad news. Like,
yeah,
the fact that it took down Grog is just, everyone was like, what?
yeah, that's pretty serious for Grog to go down.
Yeah, and you're right about the lava. Like, lava becomes a big deal in this campaign.
Yeah, it really does.
And I think Matt actually miscalculates the damage of lava in the beginning, doesn't he? He changes it later on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not super familiar with
Yeah, I think he was having the damage that it was supposed to do without realizing like how much damage it was actually meant to make. But yeah. What allegorical images, stories, or songs showed up for us here?
One thing that I really liked was the just the friendship of Vax and Grog
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
just like the complexities of it, because like they do like to tease each other and like attack each other, and there's the whole like ball tag thing and all these things. But then like when Grog needed it, Vax was willing to give up like his fancy new armor to
Yeah.
Grog, and it just shows like the different kinds of friendships that there
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
And yeah.
I think Liam plays that really well. Like he really knows how to get into the relationship dynamics of
Hmm.
their party. I think he just thinks about it more so than the other players sometimes.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before, but you can really see like the heart of Liam O'Brien behind all of his characters and in the way that they interact with the other party members and the way that he makes each relationship so unique and complex. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw this as the episode where consequences really start to heavily come into play.
Yeah.
Like both consequences for player actions as well as character actions. Like we saw consequences before, but they become heavily prevalent in this particular episode. And like one, I saw this with the first time that Matt sasses Orion for not knowing his spell modifier during
Hmm.
gameplay. And it's also the first time he questions the amount of sorcerer points that Tiberius has,
Yeah.
which is a key point moving forward.
It really is just like the start of the downfall for that.
Mm-hmm. But
And
then
yeah,
we
it was really
also,
interesting the way that the combat was formatted. Like they had this clever plan to trip the ogres. But in doing so, they actually made it more difficult for themselves because of the oozes in the cart. If they had managed to take out the ogres without damaging the cart or the glass bottles inside, they wouldn't have had to fight the oozes.
yeah, there's a lot of consequences at play. And like we see this also in the group's reaction to the unexpected amount of acid damage that the oozes caused. Like Grog falling unconscious is a big deal for the group.
Yeah.
We're so used to him being a relentless tank as a Goliath barbarian. Like it was huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the second time something like that has happened, because didn't like a few episodes ago there was the when his intelligence fell to 0?
Yeah, I literally have a note about that. I was like, it's in the previous episode where we see that, and he's rendered catatonic because of
Yeah.
it. And we see that Matt is starting to work in enemies that can take out the party's heavy hitter in one blow,
Yeah.
like just very easily, which is startling.
Yeah, and really challenges the players in a good way to come up with new things. That way it doesn't become repetitive and like the same old combat every time. There's new
Totally,
surprises, and you can see that going forward, like through the rest of Critical Role, through
totally.
campaign 1, 2, and 3, just the way that like Matt is constantly like brainstorming and reworking combats to throw new challenges at these players so that it doesn't get like boring or repetitive, because they play a lot of D&D. They do a
Yeah,
lot of battles.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
really good at keeping it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they're being forced to become more clever, more strategic, instead of just mindlessly smashing through all of the obstacles that they come across.
Yeah.
Like you said, I really think that this is what makes Matt such a genius dungeon master. Like his ability to push his players to think before acting. And then
Mm-hmm.
his ability to also like weave these narratives that aren't cut and dry, that there's so many nuances and layers to this like world building narrative aspect that he's providing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's so talented in that regard.
Yeah, and like you said, as the campaigns go on, Matt gets more and more specific when it comes to consequences.
Yes, definitely. Has more consequences in mind and different ways things can play out. And it almost becomes like this thing of seeing who can think more steps ahead than
Yeah,
the other.
yeah,
Because sometimes like the party will like come up with this plan that like takes into account the things that might happen, and then it turns out that Matt has also prepared for that as consequences for that.
yeah. Like I was wondering about that in the last episode with the fight with the Durgar general and the other mind flayer. Like Max took out the mind flayer in one go. Like he
Yeah.
was just off the board immediately. And I don't think that Matt had really prepared for that.
Yeah.
I really think that that's why he brought in that armored creature, that like rhinoceros dude, because he needed the battle to be more intense than it would have been without a mind flayer on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, really from what I've seen from a lot of like watching D&D shows and like playing in D&D myself, the players are often like players who know what they're doing are so competent that you need to build a battle that is like meant to be deadly. And like most of the time they'll overcome that unscathed.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have plan B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Like,
Yeah.
you have to have a lot of plans going forward. And we even see this in campaign 2. Like Matt changes some of his more lax homebrew rules that they had been using to make things harder on them.
Yeah.
Like he specifically puts time and effort to make it more nuanced and make it more convoluted and more strategic on their end.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that. I think it's cool to see. And like watching that is a good example for like as like a DM myself to like learn ways to make my own combat more complex and interesting.
Well, that brings me to the next question is like, what personal experiences come to mind with this episode?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that recently in one of my D&D games, we had a really challenging combat. We've recently come into possession of a like manor that is our manor, and there's been this vault in it that we've been trying to figure out the code for to see what's inside of it. And when we finally opened it, it was two of us, my character and another character, and we opened it up and there's this horde of zombies inside. So we immediately like shut the door. The rest of the party, we were in downtime, was scattered all over the place. Some were in other parts of the manor. Some were like in the nearby city getting supplies and stuff like that. So we had to like rally everyone. But even with everyone together, like the library that the vault was in such a small space between all the bookshelves. And like we really had to think. And so many people went down in that combat because there was really only the space for a couple of people to be close to the zombies at any given point.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was just a really interesting and complex combat. And it just reminds me of like from the player side, the experience of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about all of the facets of human experience. I mean,
Yeah.
That's honestly what I'm thinking about. Is like, as much as we like to use labels to like quickly categorize people, we are all very multifaceted, nuanced creatures. Like Matt realizes this as he weaves these narratives together. Is like there's no really black and white, really. There's a spectrum. And
yeah,
starting in high school, I really started advocating for like this more relative approach to like life and relationships and communication skills. I realized that like no matter how you phrase something, people will always interpret it using their own lenses. And it's when I fell in love with this certain George Bernard Shaw quote, the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
That's a good quote. I've never heard that one before.
I love it because it's so true, because miscommunications happen all the time. And we see that a lot in this campaign and in the show. And really, especially when they're based on stereotypes or like knee-jerk labeling, like lack of nuance. Because there rarely is like a yes, no, good, bad, black, white dichotomy. And I think it was like shows like Buffy that really solidified this concept for me. because Buffy actually showed us that there is a whole spectrum of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because someone was a demon didn't automatically make them evil.
Yeah.
And just because someone was a human, even a slayer, didn't automatically mean that they were good either.
Yeah. I think Matt really brings that into play, like in campaign 2. Like there's so much moral complexity and shades of gray in campaign 2. And it's one of the reasons why campaign 2 is my favorite campaign so far.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't gotten deep enough into campaign 3 yet to figure out what the themes are, if they've even settled on themes. Often those emerge as it happens. And yeah, that's what I love so much. And I think what got me into Critical Role in the first place was seeing campaign 2, and why it's taken me so long to get into campaign 1 properly is because it's only recently in the part where I am in my first watch through of campaign 1, which is they're just finished in the Feywild. That they've started to have like question these things more complexly, and things have been pitched more complexly. And
I mean, we even see this with the Grog situation in this episode. Like, just because Grog's a Goliath barbarian doesn't mean he's untakedownable.
yeah, kind of breaking up those like class stereotypes.
Yeah, and like I always love when Matt does play Sam's character too, because Sam has some scheduling conflicts that run into the problems with this beginning portion of the campaign, and Matt uses Scanlan's abilities in such a different way than Sam uses Scanlan's abilities, and I also find that fascinating as well. Like, it's the same character but with totally different players.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Sam is the one who knows the most about his character, being the one who is playing the character. But with characters, everybody interprets them slightly differently, and everybody has their own lens on how they view the character and why they do what they do. And that comes through when other people have to play other people's characters. And it's just cool to see the differences, like how they are clearly the same character, but they're just expressed differently because of the way that they are viewed by that specific person.
Yeah, and it's really the best shows and stories, in my opinion, that take this type of deeper character awareness and interplay into account.
Yeah, definitely.
Like we said, Critical Role does this really well. Matt does this really well. Even like Liam and his relationship alchemy.
Yeah, he's really good at bringing out other parts of other people just by being able to like play off of them. Like with the like his complex relationship with Grog, and his relationship with his sister, and his relationship with Keyleth, and all of these things.
Yeah, and Scanlan too. Like, I think Scanlan and Grog's relationship is fascinating.
Oh yeah.
Well. Like, we see that a lot later on, but it's just fascinating. All of these different facets that we see.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, one of the reasons why I love this show so much. I love delving into characters and seeing like what makes them who they are.
Yeah, so what are we being called to do as a result?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said, like just being aware of all the different lenses and expressions in the world, like even among people who share similar beliefs, the way that they view things will still be like different from one another. And so just being aware of that, like in our communication with other people and how we relate to other people, and just really taking the time to understand other people for who they are and how they express themselves. And yeah.
I mean, I'm being called to talk about it more often. Like, we've gotten so polarized lately as a society, immediately labeling people as good or bad based on their political views, their gender identities, their race, their sexual preferences, and all kinds of stuff. And there really is a spectrum at the end of the day.
Yeah.
we need to talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I've been making more of an effort to start these conversations and being like, well, just because X factor exists doesn't mean it automatically equals Y.
Yeah, you got to look at the nuance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sometimes with the nuance, it still like turns out that your initial assumptions are correct, but sometimes it turns out that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you really don't know until you look deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really value the people who take the time to do that. Like, and I think Matt has been a huge role model for me in that. Like I said, Buffy was a huge role model when I was younger, but Matt has kind of taken it to the next level. Is like, how can you do that on a in real time public, massively public platform?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like Critical Role got big so much faster than they were expecting and so much bigger than they were expecting. Like it must have been a shock for them to suddenly realize just how many people were viewing their campaign and how many people were viewing it critically and like having to start. I mean, I'm sure it was already there already, but like having to lean in more to that, like digging in and the nuance of everything.
Yeah, one of my favorite videos that they've ever released was right after their Kickstarter campaign started. It was like the first day of their Kickstarter campaign, and they were like planning to jump on and do a live video to like promote it and like encourage people to like donate to it. And like by the time they got online, they had already surpassed like, I don't know, 1 million, 5 million something.
Yeah.
Within 24 hours. And they just sat there for like 10 seconds, just like.
Yeah. I love that video.
That's one of my
I love
favorites.
It so much. And now we have the Legends of Vox Machina.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're showing that like in real time reaction that we all relate to. Like we're in it with them. It's not like they're a silo by themselves. It's a active community reactive effort.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm being called to talk about it more.
Nice. Well, this podcast gives you a great platform for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm also trying to do it like, you know, in day-to-day conversations with people and just bringing awareness to it. Like one of the things that I've actually been making more of an effort lately is labeling things as female and male. Like a lot of business groups that I get invited to are like female entrepreneurs or like female business owners. And I'm like, do you mean that?
Yeah.
Do you really mean that?
That's something that like, yeah, ever since I realized that I'm queer, I've really started challenging in myself and just started realizing just how gendered some things are and how unnecessarily gendered they are. And it always like gets on my nerves now whenever I see anything that is gendered unnecessarily or like puts things in boxes but doesn't leave room for people who don't fit within those boxes.
Yeah, I always ask them, are you trans inclusive?
Exactly. That's a very important question.
Yeah, like even though I'm not trans myself, I am an ally. And so I'm going to be out there poking the bear for you. Is like,
yeah.
Is your female entrepreneur group trans inclusive, or are you talking about people with ovaries? Like, let's have this conversation because we need to have it. If you're branding yourself as a female entrepreneur group, you need to be comfortable with having this conversation.
Yeah, and it's also like even within like queer spaces, it's important to ask that because there are so many like TERFs out there who act inclusive in some ways. Once you dig deeper into their beliefs, it turns out that they are extremely transphobic.
Yeah. And that's just an example of how I'm bringing these nuances more to conversations that I'm having on a day-to-day basis and being like, are you just using this word as a default because you don't know any better? or are you actually like saying you are trans exclusive? Like,
Yeah,
specifically.
exactly.
Is this a hill you're going to die on, or are you just like being lazy with your English?
Exactly. And there's such a difference in responses to both those situations, because if it is just ignorance, then that's an opportunity for
Totally.
conversation
Totally.
and like education and all of that.
Mhm.
But if it is like meant to be like more aggressively exclusive, then that's a minute to like stop and think about whether you really want to be associated with these people and groups
Yeah.
and how you want to approach that, whether that's something that you're in a space where you're able to call out, or if it's better to just cut ties and leave.
Yeah, totally. Like even today, I had a conversation where someone was like, enjoy your Easter weekend. And I was like, well, I don't celebrate Easter, but I will enjoy my weekend.
It also is like, I know that like Passover is also this weekend, and like we're in the middle of like Ramadan. Like Easter is not the only major holiday
Yeah,
going on right now, and
right.
yet it's the central focus everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like that's a nuance that people just assume too often. Like as a white presenting, standard Americanized woman,
Yeah.
people just assume that I celebrate Easter. And like I've even had messages of people reaching out to me, making sure that I get to heaven. And I'm like, I understand that you're doing this out of the good of your heart, but please accept the nuance of the world.
Exactly.
Before you say like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like there's all these nuances that just exist out there, and just because I don't actively talk about my non-Christianity on my social media profiles doesn't mean that I automatically celebrate all Christian holidays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's so many assumptions that are made based on how people look and present themselves. Yeah. And what I really want and have really been working towards is that like I really want a world where those assumptions aren't made, where there's there's room for those like spectrums of identity and all of these things, where things don't even need to be like put in boxes the way that they have like either like Christian or non-Christian. Like there's so many other religions out there, and like even within them, like do you know how many denominations are in Christianity and how many like different ways they present it? Like there's so much nuance even within like things that fall under like a more concrete label like female or Christian or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with Grog being a Goliath barbarian. Like, just because he is that or looks like that doesn't mean he's invincible. And just because I'm a white woman in America doesn't mean that I'm automatically like Christian and straight and, whatever labels you want to apply to me that are based on assumptions.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the great things about D&D is because like yes, there are these like boxes for like starting to build your character, but as you grow as a player and learn more about D&D, there are so many ways that you can just, instead of like fitting into a box of like, oh, I'm a Goliath barbarian, or like I'm a half-elf ranger. Like you can really start building off of those and use those as jumping off points for creative expression, rather than like making those two facets the whole part of your character's identity. And within that, because of all those combinations and just all the combinations of all of the factors of things that can happen in D&D, there's room for like infinite stories to be told, which is really beautiful and is why I love D&D so freaking much.
And I mean, as Matt shows us, there are consequences to our actions. There are consequences to our assumptions. There are consequences to everything we do.
Exactly. Yeah, nothing happens in a vacuum. There's always going to be like, consequences for actions, whether they're positive or negative. Your actions have an impact on the world around you.
Yeah, totally. Well, per usual, we're talking about powerful stuff on
yeah.
I mean, I joked about this last time, but we have the solution for world peace. You heard it here first on the Sacred Reading
Yeah.
podcast.
I mean, but in all seriousness, like, I think these are the building blocks.
Yeah.
Like, we're never going to reach like a like peaceful world where everybody can exist as who they are and all of these things unless we break down these assumptions and stereotypes and like really think about the nuance and complexities of the world and realize that what we experience isn't the whole reality of the world and that there's an infinite amount of experiences out there, and to adjust our worldviews to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And like, really, the best we can do as individuals is do that work within ourselves and have conversations with the people around us, with our friends and family members, to also deepen that understanding and just really build towards a less hateful world where people aren't attacked verbally or physically for just existing.
Yeah, and watch Critical Role, because they have the role, they role model it, in such a wonderful way. Like you were talking about, like the infinite possibilities that happen as a result, and you were just talking about it with D&D too. Like there's an infinite amount of possibilities that can happen in a D&D context, and that so mirrors real life. That Critical Role just displays that amazingly.
Yeah, plus D&D has that element that real life also has, which is like the randomness and out of control. It's not just like a story that somebody is deciding is happening and laying out all the steps. And I mean, those can be like beautiful to consume as well. I too enjoy those types of stories, but it has that level of reality of like, sometimes things you try don't go the way you want. Sometimes dice rolls happen and they change the course of your entire character's like character arc, whether you intended it or not. And like, it just in that way I think is able to like mirror real life in a way that is really unique to like tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, like I don't think Grog ever anticipated going unconscious in that fight.
No.
Like at all. And yeah, it's just really interesting seeing the characters grapple with those kinds of situations, because it's so relatable, because we're grappling with those kind of situations every day.
Yeah, we also, as I was saying, we have those random elements. Sometimes things happen and they change the course of our entire lives. And sometimes it can just seem like a small thing.
Yeah.
And we don't realize until later that like, whoa, if that one thing had been any different, like my life would have been on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah, totally. Well, per usual, we're talking about powerful themes here. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Can't think of anything. We've covered a lot of stuff. I won't say we've covered everything, because everything is a lot to cover.
Yeah.
But
I am not an expert in everything.
Oh, neither am I. And we'd be sitting here for a long, long, long time if we were trying to cover everything within a podcast. But I think I've said everything that needs to be said for this episode. That's the way I'll phrase it. I won't say that I've said everything.
Good. Well, audience, I always encourage you to definitely reach out and share your own thoughts and stories and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role has impacted you or influenced you or changed your life or, mirrored your real life. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So special thanks to Petall again for joining me on this episode. It has been an absolute pleasure, per usual.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I have really enjoyed being here.
Yeah. So next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 6, Part 1, and joining me will be Alyssa again. She's coming back, so I'm super excited to dive into it with her. And I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests. If you're interested for coming on, sharing your perspectives, please reach out to me and I'll send you the sign-up form. I'm on email or Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. I can't wait to chat with all of you. And in the meantime, please comment, like, and subscribe. Follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR for the juicy updates. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and always, always, always remember to love each other. Take care, guys.
Bye.